I showed you the campus commons for co-ing a college, and it's useful in order to comment about how different the use of a platform can be from one campus to another campus. So while the same power and utility of the LibreVerse, which in my opinion is the strongest, most powerful infrastructure in the OER landscape right now, any LibreNet member has access to the full scope of resources. And we have campuses that take those resources and do an excellent job of expanding and growing their infrastructure in order to move forward. We've also had campuses that come in and they basically take a more passive approach. So they host it, they put it there, and then they just hope that it's going to grow without any cultivation. And as any gardener knows, that's rarely happens, especially if you go to a campus that has multiple platforms, for example, Pressbooks and LibreText, and then you promote one over the other, typically, well, actually, either of them. The example I'm trying to give is a poor use of LibreVerse. Is if you promote Pressbooks, it's not surprising that faculty and students don't take advantage of the LibreVerse because it's not promoted. So this is an example of what happens when you actually have all your ducks in a row and you use the power of the LibreVerse to what it's intended on doing. So I'll let Rachel introduce herself because I just gave her the context and move on with there. So take it away, Rachel.
Cool. So, hello, my name is Rachel. I am a full-time OER librarian at Kalinga College. We are one of the smallest community colleges in the state of California. And when I got here, I was told that our faculty weren't interested in OER, which was so untrue. I have had faculty beating down my doors to create OERs. This community, it's a very rural, very in need of OER community. And my faculty wanted to do it. They just didn't know how. They didn't know the resources. They didn't know the digital or the media literacy skills. And so in a single academic year, we went from about 18% courses at ZTC OER to between 50 and 60% at the course level. And it's been really exciting. So we developed this ZTC campus-wide holistic integration using the LibreVerse, and it's a strategy. And my current boss, Dr. Samanani, he always talks about we do proposed strategy in motion. And because we are a super small college, we can pivot on a dime. We can do some adaptive strategies and implementation that maybe some bigger colleges couldn't do. So this is our current, I'm going to call it like a beta testing or a prototyping. And if anybody has suggestions, we are so open to suggestions. We're basically really trying to be flexible and adaptable about this. So let's see if I can click on this. Okay, so how do we get to a ZTC campus wide? When you do have to take into account academic freedom, you cannot require anyone to use anything. So it is always going to be a sales pitch. And then also, how do we move beyond this narrative of one faculty, one text at a time, which is an amazing narrative. We love that narrative. But how do we move beyond this? So we are instituting basically an institutional wide implementation, and there are a lot of moving parts. And because there's all these moving parts, we want a single system that we can use. And that's definitely going to be the LibreVerse. That's what we've started already. We were using Google Sites and Google Documents, and we were trying OER Commons. And the definition of fragmentation is just so perfect because it was just very messy. And I was spending so much time trying to work between all the different repositories. We didn't even have time to address all these other things. So once we decided that LibreVerse was going to be our one operating system, basically, we could look at things like communication management with admin, the faculty buy-in. We have the systemization of the OER workflows because our faculty are extremely overworked here, scheduling, marketing, and then of course you have to have the students' grassroots efforts. I have students come into the library all the time, upset that they have to pay $60 to rent a book on Cengage with a paid LMS one-time code. So having the students actually go back to their faculty and say, why can't we use OER? And then this institution, they hired me full-time as a full-time faculty, which was a great strategy for them because I am a peer. So I get to collaborate with them. It's not a transactional service. They can't talk down to me. I can't talk to them. We are peers working on collaboration and support. So first thing we thought about was how do we systematize OER adoption, focusing on the subject experts as the content experts they are. And we are using the LibreText or the LibreVerse in order to make this happen to create expedited workflows. Some of our other colleges we've talked to, they were like, oh, we basically are putting all of our faculty through these really intense courses to basically make them like mini OER librarians. And while that's amazing if they have the time, if they don't have the time, it was a barrier to adoption and access. So when I say our faculty here have very limited time, I know that that's a narrative that you hear everywhere, But here in the Central Valley, we actually really struggle to get a lot of teachers. So all of our full-time teachers are almost all teaching a double load. That means anywhere from 8 to 10 classes at 3 units apiece. They are really truly strapped for time. So for them to be like, oh yeah, we're going to spend time to go through a course, they don't have time to do that. So we started working on things like we would have them create a really comprehensive table of contents, often based on their Canvas shell or whatever kind of, curriculum they had. Then someone like myself would actually pull specific books from the from LibreText, and we put it in what we called an OER map. And then we would give it back to the expert, the subject expert, the faculty, and say, okay, you look it over. And if they said, yes, that looks great, we would aggregate it for them. If they said, no, actually, these 5 don't work, then we'd send them links to browse, thinking of it like sending them to very specific parts of a bookshelf for them to look just in that section. Because I found when I would send them to the ASCCC OERI list of all the discipline specific books, they would get very overwhelmed very quickly. And they're like, Rachel, I don't have time to assess 20 books. And so this was a way for us to start strategizing. I always send them a couple books first and say, hey, these are ones that are widely used. OpenStax is awesome. And we did have about 15 faculty who were like, this is good enough. I'm good to go. But most of them, because our students need a little bit more of it broken down, they need the content broken down into bite-sized pieces. Maybe they need a little bit more review at the beginning of each chapter. They really wanted to have a lot of basically remixing options. So we've been developing a workflow where it's very collaborative, where we have the library, we have student workers helping with some of the accessibility, the formatting, some of the actual aggregation and copying and pasting work, so that the faculty really can focus on what they are amazing at, which is being content experts and saying, this will work for my students, this won't work for my students, I need this broken down. And having someone like me who has a background, I have a master's in library and information science, as long as they give me very specific keywords, I can go into the LibreText bookshelves and I can start looking for that very specific content. So it's a way that we've been starting to expedite this process. And then I did have to clarify this with all of our faculty that it is an iterative process. So we have a lot of faculty who want it to be perfect. They are very, very intense and passionate about their subject areas. A lot of them are PhDs, and the very idea that they would compromise on their vision was very terrifying to them. So we had to talk about this narrative of it's an iterative process, it's flexible, it's adaptable, and we are sacrificing a little bit of perfection for momentum, meaning we're still hitting all the core, we're hitting all the SLOs, we're looking at making sure we're hitting everything for articulation, but it's not going to be perfect. But in place of this, we get to get student feedback and we get to iterate. We're using student workers to actually help us create student-centered language test banks. We started gathering feedback from students on the learning materials. I had them go through Pressbooks versus the OER Commons versus LibreText, just some user testing. And the only one that the students really were able to navigate easily was LibreText. Some of the very interesting ones with Pressbooks, they liked visually, they thought it was pretty, but then they get to the bottom of the page and they were like, how do I get to the next chapter? And they didn't even understand some of the navigation tools on Pressbooks. So it became very clear to me as a librarian doing a little user testing, LibreText was definitely the software that was going to work best for our students. So then we talked about integrated elements, and it really is extreme collaboration, integration, and communication. We're asking questions like, how do we scale this? How do we market it? How do we collaborate it? But also, how do we have really adaptive, responsive strategies? So the first thing I just talked about was systemized OER creation and adoption. We're just going to use LibreText. We're going to push that. Obviously, with academic freedom, you can't require anything, but I'm excellent at sales and I'm a highly persuasive person. And so part of it is, how do you actually sell something to someone? When we have our dual enrollment coordinator reach out to an adjunct and say, hey, we have a last minute assignment. It's Friday. Would you like to teach on a Monday? If we can sell it as we have it in the Nova, we have everything ready to go for you. So that all you have to do is basically be a course manager and then put your own spin on it. All the resources are ready for you. Here they are wrapped in a pretty package. It's a much easier sell for people who are doing like last minute adoptions even. And we're making sure we're working within curriculum, applying applicable curricular standards, including the CVC and the OER elements. We're also looking at scheduling and coordinating using the guided pathway principles. And we're looking at how do we do an institution-wide rollout. And again, if anybody knows of anyone who's been able to do this so far, I haven't been able to find one. So we are flying blind. And this is something that I really enjoy doing, but it also means that nothing is set in stone. So all of the different pieces we're currently trying to make sure we collaborate with: student services, EOPS, DOPS, counselors to make sure when they actually talk to students, they, are explaining these things, talking about dual enrollment. We have a large dual enrollment enrollment program, talking about marketing and social media, the faculty themselves, external advocates like the ASCCC OERI projects, people like Delmar, as well as the students. You have to have the grassroots information distribution, and we're really looking at using student equity and achievement program principles. And then the last step, because we are so small, we have the ability to pivot. We have the ability to say, okay, well, that was a failure. That just gives us more information. How can we respond to that? That was a pain point. How can we fix that? So we're looking at making a change management plan. So this is, and I know this is a messy one. I was going to fix this up for you guys and I didn't get to it. This is kind of our beta testing institution-wide strategy. It is all being driven by our college mission, our strategic plan, and we are really looking at ZTC cohorts to start with in every single pathway. Now, because of academic freedom, again, you cannot require anyone to do anything, but you can sell anything you want. And you can also schedule a ZTC pathway once you have at least one faculty who teaches in every single course. So our first milestone is every transferable pathway. This requires admin scheduling, faculty buy-in, counselors in marketing and student services. It requires the sales pitch that I talked a little bit about. We do currently use Canvas and our faculty are very comfortable with it. I love the Nova and I'm really excited about that. That's something that I think will be a really great benefit to us. But in the short term, they are very comfortable with Canvas. So if they don't have to learn a new software, that downloading from LibreText, the IMSCC files, as I think it's the Canvas export package, huge selling point. I did it at a large Campuswide event, and I showed them how to do it. And you should see, we went from, just in that event, we had 10 people who went on to LibreText, found a current book, and we're like, I'm just going to integrate this in myself. I don't need to build one. This is amazing. So that was a huge selling point. And then we are doing the systematization of OER adoption workflows. And then we have our second two milestones are the ZTC cohorts for CTE, as well as our local AA pathways. And we do have a couple challenges. Our HVAC, it's just heavy machinery content. And then things like our psych tech, which has licensing for states that we have to be very careful about. We're doing a diesel technology, a truck driving one right now, which requires a lot of things like the DMB. And so we're making sure that we're able to do that, but there are some pain points there that we're going to have to work through. And then lastly, evidence-based adoption is going to be how we get to full campus adoption. Once we have ZTC cohorts in every single pathway, enrollment drives change. And students always want this, but they need to know what ZTC stands for. They need to understand how it works. And once we start having those numbers being full, we really only have 2 or 3 faculty or holdouts, and they're not strong holdouts. They basically just have some hesitation. And I think once we get a little bit more momentum on this, it'll be really easy to convince them. One of them, I already have them on the ropes. I just have to give them some prototypes. So this is our growth strategy that we're talking about. How do we scale this? And this is Dr. Samanani's biggest rule. You always underpromise and overdeliver. So we have realistic timelines, and that's to include our scheduling. We are one of the few colleges that has to schedule everything out a year in advance. So when we're talking about phase 1 ZTC cohorts, as far as having the OERs and the faculty who can teach that, within a year, we'll have it in every single pathway. But as far as being able to make sure that we have that scheduled, we have all the implementation, we're looking at 2 to 3 years. All the faculty are willing. It's just a matter of these logistics and having one single software like LibreVerse to basically really push. It'll help us systematize so then we can work on those pain points within our own system. Our second phase is going to be, again, the ZTC cohorts for CTE and the local. And again, the realistic timeline is 3 to 4 years because of scheduling. But as far as getting it built, our faculty, I've never seen so many faculty so motivated to get this done. So I think that we will have most of the OERs done in 1 to 2 years. And then lastly, again, we're looking at this evidence-based adoption. And part of the reason we can do this is because we are so small. If we were a really big institution, this would be really difficult to do and we wouldn't be able to pivot. When we hit a pain point, I literally walk across the street to my boss's office and I go, hey, Sam, like this came up. How do you want to handle it? And we can brainstorm. And it has been so effective. This is a very tight-knit community and they are so passionate about their people that they're willing to go above and beyond. So how do we expedite our OER adoption and scale this process? It really requires extreme community, which we have here in a way that I've never seen in an institution before. And you have to have a belief that higher education is a human right. Now, this is one of mine. It's one of my biggest ones. It's why I became a librarian. You have to have a desire for informed citizenry for all people, as well as think about this in terms of almost social justice work and understanding that it's a lot of moving pieces and there isn't a one size fits all, and it requires a lot of adaptability and flexibility. So we at Kalinga College here, we're extremely committed to doing this work. We're excited to iterate and adapt and move forward. We just started, like when I got here again, they were pretty behind, but we're sprinting to catch up. And our small college really fosters this innovation and agility within our strategies. If any of you guys have ideas on how we could benefit from this or how we could work through it, our tight-knit community really allows us to respond swiftly and effectively to new changes, and we're really excited to use the LibreVerse to really expedite this process and make us a ZTC campus. Thank you so much, and send me any emails if you have any thoughts.
Thank you, Rachel. That was
Yes, sir. Sorry I talked so fast.
Yeah, well, as Josh mentioned in a tweet to me, his wife was asked about why she talked so fast, and it's because her response was because I have so much to say, which sounds quite great here. Does anyone have any questions, concerns off of what Rachel mentioned? I think this is quite exciting, and the infrastructure that she is setting up and getting going has great potential, both for her campus and also used as a case study for other campuses in order to capitalize on the true power what the LibreVerse provides. Yes, Martin. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, Rachel, do you have different strategies in terms of your pitch between adjuncts and full-time?
So it's been very interesting here. So I came in again. I wasn't from the world of higher education. I came in from different backgrounds, and so I come in just asking questions. And so I always started with anyone who was a high impact class. So like I came in and Sam and I talked about a strategy, and so we started with what we called low hanging fruit, which were people who taught a whole bunch of classes and would benefit the most students. And that was almost always going to be our tenured faculty who were teaching multiple classes. And then we really started looking at anyone who had high enrollment classes. And so I started doing that. So it wasn't really so much about strategizing or the different pitches between adjuncts and tenure as much as it was looking at the impact that it would have on them. And then for me, I am a salesperson, so I go in and there isn't one single strategy that I use. Some faculty, it's all about basically the mission, right? You help your students. And, you can talk about, I pull up studies such as like, when you ask students, if you don't have to pay for textbooks, would you take another course? They always say things like, no, I'm going to pay for gas to get here, or I'm going to buy food for my family. And out here in the Valley, a single textbook could pay for rice and beans for a family for an entire month. So we're talking about like, do I want to feed my entire family of 5 for a month, or do I want to buy this one textbook? So for some people, it is a cost argument. For some, it is a mission argument. For others, it is literally an accessibility argument. We have a stats teacher, and he doesn't love the OpenStax book, but he loves that every single student has that book in hand. And we had this conversation of that's just equality, right? Having every single student have the book in hand on that first day. And then we talked about equity, how like because it's OpenStax, we can print it really easily. And so then for those students who are struggling, we can print it at cost and have it in the library for semester-long checkouts. So for Scott, the sales pitch had nothing to do with the cost. It had to do with accessibility and equity. So every single faculty is different. And I think this is one of the reasons I think going to college went with me is because I love this kind of like interpersonal conversations. And so I always just start by asking questions with faculty. Why wouldn't you switch over? Our biggest holdouts right now, we have a very old school, very brilliant business faculty who teaches accounting, and her biggest concern is quality control. She wants to make sure there's really strong quality. And so for her, we're talking about how do we build the impossible burger? How do we actually show her that there's amazing resources out there along with all the ancillaries? And so she's actually really open to it already, but it's been more of an ongoing conversation where she has to marinate on it. And as someone who's like super fast and wants to just get stuff done, it's been something that I've had to really remind myself that some people need to marinate. Give them an idea, let them think about it, come back to it. I've had adjuncts reach out because often adjuncts are assigned here really last minute. Like we have someone drop out. And so like they'll be, our dual enrollment coordinator says there's been times where she calls on a Friday and asks them to start on a Monday. And for those faculty, I've literally had adjuncts call me and be like, what do you have available for me? Like I'm starting this class in 3 days. Like, yes, I have a master's in this, but I've never even taught this at your college. And so having something like Nova where we could say, here you go. You can basically be a course manager, twist it to fit your needs. That has actually been the greatest sales point, has been just like the ease of transition with the ancillaries pre-built out. And so we are actually also having our faculty here, if they're willing to share their Canvas hubs with that IMSCC file from LibreText fully embedded, that has also been a huge selling point for our adjuncts, just because often our adjuncts are working at like 3 different places. They're going between here and Fresno City College and Reedley. They're going all over the place. And so if we can lessen the workload on adjuncts, that has been a great sales point for adjuncts. But the tenure faculty, it's all over the place. It really depends on them. So for me, I take it one faculty at a time, and it's a lot of body language reading, to be quite honest. I know that's not probably the answer you wanted, sir. And yes, Stephanie, I am very intense. I'm so sorry that I'm so intense. I love this work. I got into this work because I believe in this work. I see someone's hand raised. Do we have another question?
Hi, it's Nadia. Yeah, I was just curious, in the process of you curate or helping people to find what they needed, I feel like there's a lot of fantastic ancillary materials in STEM, but I'm not finding as much for like humanities. I teach early childhood education. So we have a ton of textbooks, which is
Yes.
fantastic, but not a lot of ancillary materials, which I find for the people who are a little nervous about going to OER, that's the big part. Do you have suggestions based on what you all have done?
Yeah, so like we're part of the ASCCC OER cohort for elementary education as well as child development. And this has been one of the ongoing conversations is like, yeah, there's lots of OER textbooks, but where are all the ancillaries for this? What are we doing about this? And we just hired Dr. Jennifer Marta, who is extremely passionate about this work as our full-time. And her biggest goal is how do we start building out all the ancillaries? And so we tried like AI gamma technology for like building out PowerPoints. It'll do PowerPoints there, it's free to use and it builds it out. And if you put in all of the bullet points, it does a pretty good job of basically giving you basic strategies. It is having to be built out from scratch. I have found that our student workers really love to help with this process. And because I work in the library and we have a lot of its work study here in the library, if the full-time faculty give us or the adjuncts give us all the content they want in slides, I have right now in the library, her name's Paige. She's an art major. She loves the visual elements. She loves putting stuff together like that. And she loves finding Canvas Commons images. So we are having to build some of it. And then some of it we're also able to pull. We find people who like, I've reached out to a lot of people. I cold email people all the time and be like, hey, I know that you teach this course. Would you happen to have anything you'd be willing to share? And I've been so surprised, especially in child development and elementary education, how many people, when they realize and I explain the CC by NC license, like no one's going to make money off of this, I promise. Suddenly they're like, oh yeah, sure, here it is. And they'll just send me or they'll send me a Dropbox link. And so I've been getting a lot of that. Biggest issue is where are we housing it? Where's the repository so that anybody can have access to this? So long term, I think things like the Nova could be really helpful for that if we can build it all in to have all the ancillaries in one location. So the house is in LibreText. Yes, Joss, absolutely. So like it's been really cool as someone who like I'm still learning about LibreText and LibreVerse. So I don't even know all of its capabilities, but I think that's going to be a big part of it. Like as far as some of the English, I had an English professor come up and he's like, Rachel, the translation of the Iliad that I want to use is under copyright. What am I supposed to do about that? And I said, what if you took 2 semesters where you had your students actually translate it, and then you had a student translated version of the Iliad? So like change it up a little bit, and you end up with a final product that is Creative Commons, actually written in like student-centered language. And he was like, that could be so much fun. And I was like, yes. So like we're trying to get the faculty to think outside the box when it comes to ancillaries. We do have one of our biggest issues is what is it? Growing Up in Mississippi. Our English teacher, she uses, oh my gosh, what's the name of the book? Growing Up in Mississippi. Um, and it's under copyright. And the problem is there's nothing we can do about that. So we're talking about, can we get a class set for the library so we can do semester-long checkouts on that? Because for certain things in English, that's going to be a hard sell. Like we found all sorts of literature reviews that were OER on, I think it's Growing Up in Mississippi. Is the one that she uses. But there's a couple others like that where like, unless it's under public domain for the English department, that's going to be a hard sell. But for things like the Iliad, having the students write their own, our English faculty tried it this summer and he was like, Rachel, it's been a blast. It's been super fun and creative. And so we're actually helping him basically create a student translated Iliad to work off of. So it's been really fun and interesting. As far as like other ancillaries, Jen Marta is having her students for test banks. She has them write 5 test questions, like, so the tests are a little bit shorter. And she says, write me 5 test questions and why you think this test question should be included. And she says her students are actually learning the information better because they're having to really think about what's important and what's not. She gets student written language for test banks, and then we aggregate all that together. So that's been super fun. But as far as like the actual PowerPoints, Gamma has been pretty helpful. It's a little interesting, but yeah, as long as you give it all the PowerPoints, like all the bullet points, it'll do it for you. And then we've been using, what else have we been using for some of the ancillaries? It's a really interesting process, but we're being creative, basically, is the short answer. And I'm sorry, again, that's not like an easy, like, oh, here's a one repository where they're all listed for you and you can just go and grab that. But I think long term, I think that could be LibreText long term. I'm really thinking we're moving that way.
Thank you. What was the name of it's something gamma beta? What was
it's gamma.app. And it's literally, let me see if I can find it. I'll put it in the chat. I want to say it's gamma.app. Yes, gamma.app. Okay. It is an AI PowerPoint generated thing. And it's not perfect, but what I've found is that once you do it, like you put in with very specific bullet points that you want, it can then generate it and you can edit it. and make it better. So it really helped us expedite, and our students love doing, like, they can't do the content itself, but once we have the base built and I give it to them, they're like, we get to help and we get to help. And I'm like, yeah. And it's been really cool to see how engaged they are in the process.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, ma'am. And I'm sorry I speak so fast. I get so excited about this work, folks. And I just love it so much.
No, this is beautiful. This is
All right.
great. Thank you very much.